Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristin Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hello, and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. We're excited for a very special conversation today. Joining us is Yolanda F. Johnson, and I have known of Yolanda's work for a very long time, but this is the first time I've actually met her. Yolanda is an incredible advocate in the space of inclusive philanthropy, and there have been so many changes happening in the nonprofit space that we wanted to really dive into what she's seeing, advice that she has, ways in which she's navigating just the ever-changing landscape. So we're very excited to be able to dive in today and welcome Yolanda to the show. I wanted to first turn it over to Kristin to do a formal official introduction.
Let's do it. Yolanda F. Johnson is the founder of YFJ Consulting and founder of Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy. With more than 2 decades of experience in the nonprofit sector, Yolanda has successfully led fundraising operations for a wide range of nonprofit organizations, launching creative events, sponsorship, and marketing initiatives that produce new streams of both contributed and earned income. Her fundraising expertise includes securing foundation, corporate, and government funding, and cultivating a diverse major gifts portfolio. We're so glad you're here. So glad you're here. Yolanda, tell us about your work.
Well, I love to tell this brief, but I find it to be poignant and enjoyable story. I have a background, and I still actively perform as a performing artist, as an opera singer, actually.
Amazing.
And when I was getting my performance degree in undergraduate, it was a time where there was just this epidemic, we called it, of orchestra closings.
Yep.
Always. No offense to the string players, like the string player who was moonlighting as an executive director, but that didn't have the fundraising and administrative acumen. It was before the big advent of the arts administration programs. And so I said to my professor, I was like, my dancer friends will be fine. My visual artist friends will be fine. My theater friends will be fine. I am not going to be okay. And none of us who are performance majors, voice majors, are going to be okay because we can't perform to pre-recorded music like that. And he said, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, I am going to make sure I learn the other side of the arts. And so I went to graduate school and got a master's in arts administration with a focus on philanthropy and events. And the rest is history, because I said, this philanthropy thing is powerful. I threw the first School of Music fundraising gala because we needed to raise money for something as a senior in college. And so I just knew we were on to something. And then I said, I can help women, and I can help, people with disabilities, differently able people. I can help children. I can help religious institutions. I can help so many people with this tool of philanthropy. And so that's why I've had a simultaneous track, and I have a workshop called All the World's a Stage, where I actually use performance practice for making the ask and for philanthropy. I do it a lot with boards and leadership groups on getting ready to go out there and fundraise on the front line. So that's my happy place, where the worlds converge. And that led me to the work that I do now, all the different things that you said. I love being a consultant because I get to work with those I want to work with and the missions that I really want to move forward. It's a beautiful thing about it. It's just been a wonderful journey for me with all of the different roles I've played, both at the intersection. My work's at the intersection of fundraising and philanthropy, being a purist with how we talk about philanthropy. So it's, I'm an impact philanthropy advisor, I'm an IPA. So from the grant making perspective, and then also from the fundraising perspective, being able to develop strategy for over $1 billion for nonprofits now. So that's my work. And I'm able to thankfully craft a life of doing all the things I love to do.
I love when people can live their personal missions and change the world while they're doing it. We are so honored you're here, and we're so excited for you to be able to share your insight with our listeners.
Well, and I know your work as teacher, educator, advocate. Like you are, you're a profound public speaker and have done so much in the work of education. I'm so excited to learn that you come from the arts and events world, which is that's our
jam
space too.
Yeah.
So that's a fun little addition.
So, big picture, what is inclusive philanthropy?
Inclusive philanthropy is when we think differently. We step outside of comfort zones, outside of boxes, and we are open and we are free to allowing support and resources to come in from, you name it. It's being inclusive. So it's thinking differently than the traditional fundraising model that has been so popular here in the United States, which really in some ways has made wonderful strides, but in other ways is stuck somewhere in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
And so we want to get away from the transactional model. We want to have real relationships with real people. We want to understand who the people are. And we don't want to put that word inclusive in a box itself of only belonging to one category. And so that means it's education as far as philanthropy is concerned. It's if I'm having a panel discussion, if I'm hiring a keynote speaker, if I'm having someone come in to do a workshop, I could easily call someone on my list of top fives that's in my back pocket, that whoever they are, I can just call them. Or I can think differently of what does my audience look like? Who might bring a different perspective? And when you're thinking of funding, you're thinking, what does my audience look like? Who might bring a different perspective and different dollars to something? Not making assumptions, but being open. So I'm known for a few different quotes. And one of them is, don't treat your donors of color like an EIA team.
Yep.
And I just said that because, of course, that may be something that's important to them, but they could be lovers of visual art and whatever else, all the above, culinary, arts. And you want to tap into who the person is, not who they manifestly may be or may appear to be. And so that's why my work specifically with donors of color, but also with women donors and women's philanthropy has been so important to me. Differently abled donors with disabilities, and just thinking differently as far as who our audience is and how we engage with them.
Amazing. I feel like it's a long overdue conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much of our work when we look at the event space is often that turn of the century golden age era of
the Gilded Age.
The Gilded Age, right?
There's a show out about it right now. Yes.
Of
new money.
Yes. And I have a big event at Christmas time in Mrs. Astor's home.
You do?
The staircase. I'm on the board of trustees of the museum where that building is. And so I have a big tea party. So you have to come.
That's incredible.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, I feel like that has sort of been this obstacle for us in the fundraising space where it's this work was predicated on white women gaining social ladder climbing, right? And they would do charity lunches. And so the event models we had originated out of that. And we've been trying to bust down those event models and have conversations about community-centered fundraising and think differently about who our donors are. And it is this sort of constant ebb and flow of wealth screening versus donor-centered versus community-centric. And I feel like we're learning so much. And then there's this national administration conversation of no, we're not going to have these conversations anymore. Right. And we've seen organizations in that sort of jello mode of we don't know where to go from here.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing as far as changes right now? How is the nonprofit sector evolving in this conversation?
Well, I think that we go through different phases. And I think what we're starting to see right now is some activation. Yeah. But the nonprofit sector, the sector of good work, which is so closely linked to the good work that the government and also private sector, are doing, there was a bit of shell shock.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, just what is going on, what's going to happen. And then as the agenda has become clearer, it's just, okay. And then, the nonprofit sector is also looking to elected leadership. We're looking to political candidates and those who are lawmakers to see how they are going to stand up for the good work. Because if you don't have that sort of support, it's really a missing piece of that greater puzzle that needs to fit together in order to keep the good work going. And so I think right now there's a spirit of activation in the sense of navigation.
Yep.
And how do nonprofits engage with their donors when the work that they're doing may not be a priority anymore as far as the government is concerned, but it still matters, and it matters to their constituents. It matters to the whole fabric of our society. So it'll be very interesting. I was talking to some academics about it to say, that was around the time of USAID and all those different things. But then I saw, my colleague, Allison from every.org start to put together a fund. It's how do we get how do we keep going? We can't stand still because people's lives are at risk. But what does this look like on the other side?
Yeah.
You're looking at all the things Bill Gates is talking about. If so much that was government goes private sector. What does that look like? Right now, it would look great because you just want to continue to exist and do your work. But it was never intended to be that way on that scale because of the impartiality of a government funding body, right? That makes sure that everything, there's certain checks and balances and things if you go completely private, then you're in many ways at the whim of that donor as well, or those donors. So it'll be very interesting to see just how, if it does go that direction, how hands-off private donors might be. It's going to be a really interesting time if you look at some of the things that came out in the news this week around some of the taxes and nonprofits and private foundations. But pending some further legislation, there is a solution to that, and it's the Donor Advised Fund. And so talking to lots of people about that, it's a fascinating time, but we would love fascination without risk. And without any people hurting and missions hurting. But it's just like when the tax laws changed around itemization, we all said, how generous will people remain? And they did. They stayed the course. There were some changes, but donors stood by their organizations during COVID. There were some shifts that I saw, and people really had to make the case for their unique value proposition when they have similar missions because philanthropic priorities shifted. But so right now, I think it's a time of activation and getting to know donors better and have those honest conversations. On the other side of that, I was just speaking with a friend who's an economist from the London School of Economics. We actually have some micro chats that are going to be coming out soon about the economy right now.
Oh, cool.
And how does that impact donors? How will that impact donors? How will it impact planned giving? Woke just did a learning lab around, and I'm referencing Woke and didn't say, you said I was the founder of Women of Color.
Yeah, Women of Color. Yeah.
That's Woke.
Yeah.
But we just did a learning lab on planned giving with an excellent expert, Cynthia Redrick. But And that's a mysterious sort of thing because you don't really know what you're going to get anyway. But it's like, is that shifting and like before our eyes, but we don't see it because people are like, hey, I'm not leaving as much because I have to live on this now. Lots of different things happening, and people are just trying to keep their fingers on the pulse, react, but not be reactive, and really engage their donors and understand them better.
I had a dinner last night with an executive director, and she lost 5 of her major donors in like 1 week, meaning corporate organizations, government grant. And I had this moment of, oh no, what are you going to do? And she said very quickly, very open conversations with some of her key donors and her board of directors led to, they increased their earned revenue line. They like changed their pricing structure basically for their earned revenue income and thought that they would get kickback, and they didn't. They had a very positive response, and they had donors all step up in a like profound way of like, let me help you fill the gap. Let me help you. This is work I want to be invested in. So I love the idea of like, being attentive, understanding, but not being reactive, and figuring out how to react, but not in a like, that's it, we're done. And yet the juxtaposition of what is happening in the world right now is mind blowing to me, because we have like the economy concern, the federal funding concern, And yet at the same time, we're seeing organizations have some of their biggest revenue years as a response. I mean, you're in New York, Yolanda, and I have been so in love with this year's red carpet looks at the Met Gala and discovered the day after the Met Gala that it was the largest fundraising event in their history. And I'm like, this juxtaposition that these two things can be happening at the same time. It is a fascinating time. And I love that you're looking at the economic studies and looking at, what the long-term impact is going to be, because I think that there's such a need right now for organizations to have a bigger picture painted for them.
Well, and I think that duality has always been true, right?
Yeah.
What's happening externally and what we're doing internally in light of our mission. I think the volume is super high on that. Yolanda, how do organizations continue to stay true to their mission with some of the funding threats we're living under? I mean, I think of Sam's conversation with the executive director last night. They have some of that scaffolding and support to be able to make those clear-eyed decisions and to have them pan out. A lot of folks, hi listeners, we see you, we hear you. A lot of folks don't necessarily have some of that scaffolding. And so how do folks continue doing the good work when everywhere around them is a potential dumpster fire?
Yeah, I think that it's the same thing that we've had to do. It is novel in many ways, but then we can also draw parallels to other times in economic history where we've had to, everyone has to just, again, I go back to break away from that transactional model of fundraising. That's what that executive director did essentially is who are my people? Who are my people? Who's my tribe? Who are those who are going to stand by me? Just like what happened with COVID. Who's going to stick by me? Who's going to say my gift is no longer restricted to that particular program or building? You keep the lights on. You keep existing. I think that there's going to be, and there has been, a lot of streamlining and just prioritization, reprioritization. What is truly our mission? What is truly most important to what we do right now? What is critical and fundamental to living out this good work? And then having a plan, to be able to pivot. And that's the word that came out again with COVID was pivot, pivot, pivot. Yep. People were pivoting left and right. But I always said pivot, right? But pivot means pivot in its actual, definition means that you are firmly planted in a spot. And it's from that spot that you then can pivot to wherever else you need to be. And so I think that nonprofits and nonprofit leadership are going to have to be firmly planted in that spot of their mission and know who's going to be behind them. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that there's another layer to this. And it's something that some of my colleagues and I started to notice before a lot of people were talking about it a couple of months ago when we had the first lawsuit that listed a donor or a funder as the defendant. We knew that would be a game changer because that's something that donors really don't want to get into. People want to do good work, but they are not here for litigation and being parts of things. And so, it's some of those other things that I think that were intimidating to donors and probably intended to be such, And so there are other layers to things this time. That's part of the thing that's novel about what's happening. But again, it really comes back down to knowing who's for you and how does that work and how does that look? And remembering and understanding that it's that two-way street. It's not just you that may be in need. Don't make assumptions. It was the same. It's so many parallels to COVID.
Absolutely.
Don't make assumptions about what's going on in a donor's life. They could be sick. Something could be happening with their company, where they don't know. They're streamlining. Therefore, they're going to have to streamline with you. And so just seeing that big picture, seeing people as people before they're donors, seeing them truly as stakeholders and understanding them as individuals, I think is going to be key in having those hard and honest and transparent conversations and not being afraid to make some different kinds of asks. And to really broaden that donor base, even, there may be some flexibility on the donor side is what I'm saying. So just, make those asks. I know people who we're going to hold off on something. We're like, you know what? Why would I hold off now?
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen next week.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That take action, just continue moving that needle forward in conversation. You sit in the middle, though, in your work of both being a coach and advisor consultant in the foundation space and in the nonprofit space. I'm curious if you're seeing foundation shift, how they're responding.
Everybody's trying to respond. I mean, even from the corporate perspective, everybody's trying to respond because no one wants to be targeted.
Yeah.
Again, people are here for good work. They're not here for drama or, the other things. And that's how you have to sort of weigh things. Those who really want to stay the course, but it's difficult to go, this generation, our generation hasn't really lived through some of the things that previous generations haven't had to have some of the challenges and the struggles that have happened in the past. It's been, in many ways relatively comfortable as far as that's concerned because of the societal changes that have happened. But, we might have to just, think differently and think of the role that we can play as far as that's concerned. And so foundations are no different than others. Everybody's trying to think about how to navigate these waters. Everyone's trying to think about how they keep the work going. So with these new potential laws that have been presented, it's got everybody thinking, what are we going to do? Because we need to survive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our survival is pivotal to the survival of other organizations. So how do we navigate the situation? And so I think everybody's just watching what's happening very closely. Now, interestingly, from a political perspective, this has been a bit of an equalizer in some ways because it's no longer depending, regardless of your party or affiliation, this is a Republican bill, the new potential tax laws.
Yeah.
So the National Council of Nonprofits was like, reach out to your Republican, legislators and lawmakers to talk about this. It doesn't matter what your background is. That's thinking inclusively, almost in an entirely different way that we have to think with a different big picture of how you make the case to people that may or may not think the same way as you do.
I've been grateful for one of the foundations in our community as the nonprofit sector has been responding. They have just been a very calm voice because they are in a national conversation with other foundations. They're having big conversations about, how is this impacting you and where are you headed and what decisions are you making? And that is bringing, I think, that bigger picture. And so when we've had organizations gathering around how do we respond and what's next and what's coming and who do we call and who do we contact, I feel like they have a really beautiful grounding centered voice in the conversation for our nonprofit friends. So I appreciate that the foundation world is working in this interesting collaboration that I haven't witnessed in my work. I don't know, maybe you've witnessed more of it, but a lot of cross collaboration between family foundations across the corporate foundations and corporate foundations across the community foundations. So it's been interesting to see we got through COVID and they're like, okay, let's take those learnings and figure out how we, move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly, I've been a part of some conversations where there have been convenings and I think toward the beginning of the year, especially, there was still the shell shock and what do we do with this? And so one of the first things was convening. So yes, that's another thing that is definitely happening in the foundation world, more open lines of communication, sharing of best practices, sharing of thoughts and ideas. And so it is a lovely thing to see that happen as well, that spirit of collaboration.
Yeah, I think now is not the time to isolate, whether, you're a development professional sitting at your nonprofit or sitting at a foundation. The ability to be in relationship, to collaborate, to create solutions together, to be able to learn from other people's testing. This is that time for sure.
Yeah, I think that was one of the early calls to action we heard even before inauguration, just like right after election it's about community. Like we keep talking about national, global scale, but let's look to our neighbor, and I think our nonprofits need to be doing that. We've been encouraging gathering more. Yep. And you have a big gathering coming up that we want to talk about when we come back, but we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about your big event coming up.
Great.
All right, great.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the Fundraising Elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristin for your program and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at elevatenonprofit.com. You can also find the link in the show notes.
We are here with Yolanda F. Johnson talking about the changing of evolution, the pivot that we're seeing, the continued pivot. And, so much of our work is in events, and we really see the value in gathering right now. We really see the importance of people being in space together, being in community, having conversations, being able to feel like they're a part of something. And you have a big 5-year anniversary event coming up that I want to make sure we talk about. So Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy is celebrating its 5-year anniversary. Tell me a little bit about that event and what you have planned.
We are so thrilled about this. Thank you for asking, because I've started to use the term ridiculously excited. I think it's a British term, but I'm ridiculously excited about everything that's happening. I sat over there, in my living room and dreamed up Woke and the whole concept of bringing people together 5 years ago. And now we're just celebrating all the fruit of that labor and all the wonderful people that I'm able and grateful to be able to give their flowers to on Wednesday, June 25th. That whole week of the 23rd of June is Woke Week. Every year, the last week of June is Woke Week.
Amazing.
And the Wednesday is usually the Woke Awards, where we're all going to come together. And we have the inaugural Catherine Katie Ferguson Award that's going to Madeline Holder, who's the VP of Development at the New York Women's Foundation, and Madeline Moore Holder. Katie Ferguson was a slave who bought her freedom through entrepreneurship. She was a baker and purchased her freedom. She went to Second Presbyterian Church in New York City, which still exists, and they have all the historians who are doing a lot of work in this area with her. She wasn't literate, and so a lot of her story wasn't known, but she had been ripped from her mother's arms as a small child, and so caring for children was really important for her. And so she not only started the first Sunday school in the United States, but she also used her entrepreneurship to be philanthropic, and she helped children of all backgrounds, white children, black children, everybody, and opened a home for unwed mothers. So it's
amazing.
You can't beat that. And they just named a street in the 90s in Central Park West after her. And so we are naming this inaugural Philanthropy Award after her. So we bestowing that. And then we have our award for excellence, our Shine Award. You see, we talk a lot about light.
Yeah, it's great.
The Spotlight Award and that covers emerging professional, mid-career professional, and someone who just inspires us, who's achieved so much. And that's Birgit Smith-Burton with the award for excellence.
Yes, we love Birgit.
Yes, dear friend, Birgit.
Yes.
And then and she's been there since the beginning as far as Woke is concerned as well. And then we've got Evelyn Hernandez, who is going to receive our Shine Award. And we have Sabrina Hua, who is going to receive the Spotlight Award.
Wow.
And then we have our corporate honoree, who is Boyden, because they have just stayed the course so much as far as their search work and being inclusively minded. And then we have something called the Steadfast Originals, which I made that up because they're the people that when I had this idea in the middle of the pandemic, they were like, what? Okay.
Yes.
And so I just called in the favor and said, do it for me. And that's CCS Fundraising and Aspen Leadership Group and Hal Lewis International. So we're just going to be celebrating all over the place in New York City on June 25th. And we encourage anyone who is around and wants to come. We're going to have some performing arts additions in there. I've been working on an opera about philanthropy, so we're going to premiere part of that there.
Yes.
So it'll be great. Come. I hope you come. Will you be in the New York? Will you be
an opera about philanthropy?
I totally want to come to an opera.
I want to come to the opera.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, you do events.
Yes,
you have a background
clearly.
in events. You like events. Events are our jam. What are the opportunities for inclusive philanthropy at events or through events?
Well, I think the first thing that people have to recognize is, oh my gosh, if you want to stoke my ire, call it the party. Now, with that particular article, the party.
Yeah.
As though it's that thing that's otherized that I'm going to pay attention during that time. No, it is a tool. It is an engagement tool.
Yes.
And, those first 24 hours following an event are the most pivotal moments that you will have toward what happens afterwards and how you can garden. In your fundraising garden, how many seeds you were able to plant, how you were able to plant those seeds so you can engage and continue toward the ask. And so I just think that, again, when you think out of the box, what's your entertainment like? Like, what vendors are you using?
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it's just thinking differently, right?
Yep.
Who can bring different perspectives and talents and gifts and beauty, to your event, or creativity to your event. So what does that look like? Who's the planner? Who's the consultant? What does it look like? And what's the guest experience like? And is there something cultural about that? Or maybe there isn't. But who can you bring to the table to add a different flair to it so that your mission shines through and that people have fun and that the food is good? I've been to many glamorous events, and if the food was bad, it's like, that
true.
was amazing. And I saw all the people and did all the things, but was that chicken?
Yes.
So that's what I would say about thinking inclusively.
If it's fine food, nobody talks about it.
But
if it's terrible food, it is the commentary.
Well, the next 3 years,
yes,
we'll talk about
and
it.
then your committee gets hung up, and you're doing tasting after tasting after tasting. So do yourself a favor. I love how you talk and are reminding us to think about inclusion as this really just expansive space.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come at it in a very limited format and are literally thinking about who's at the table.
Right.
No. We're done. We have to be done and past that. It's all of it. And this sort of 360 view of how do we invite more in?
Yeah.
And what can that look like? And what does that help us do?
Yeah, we have the pleasure of working with a group called Taste for Equity, in which they specifically ask for every single element of their event if this is living our mission.
Yeah.
And they should. That's great.
Yeah, and it yields a really amazing event because they have such an incredible range of vendor partners that they work with, of, folks that bring art and experience to the guest experience. So I'm excited about your events. I hope our New York friends will make sure to check it out. I'm also excited about something you just mentioned, which is the pivot team. During the pandemic, we used to laugh because we really quickly moved into the space of virtual fundraising events, hybrid fundraising events.
Yeah.
And we talked about pivoting so often we felt like we were pirouetting. But that pivot team that you created, I think, became a resource for folks to be responsive in that moment, in the moment of what do we do now? I think we're in that moment again, where a lot of folks, I'm witnessing a lot of organizations sit in a wait and see mode. They're gathering information, but they're not taking action. So I'm curious, if you were to gather your pivot team together, what's the advice, what wisdom, what insights would you share for folks right now that are kind of stuck in a wait and see?
I would be sure to have people that understand you and your mission, of course, stakeholders around, but also I believe in being a lifelong learner and being helpable is the word. Caroline Kim O, shout out to her, executive coach, leadership coach, That's a really important thing to be helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
To understand that there are other perspectives to gain and things to learn as you're trying to pivot. So that objective perspective. And then in music, of course, that comparison metaphor, if you will, is the career decline begins when you stop having a teacher or a coach.
Oh.
Yep.
Because
Oh, what
you
a
don't
great
have that person
analogy.
there to tell you no. You don't have someone there to just be like, oh, that didn't sound quite right, or that sounded great, and this is what you should do. So have your squad, your people around you that can bring other perspectives in as well. We've got to get down to the nitty gritty. You need to have people with financial acumen. You've got to have the heart and the head and all the different things, then people with the hand who are going to be able to support that. And we all know that the old saying, the adage of ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. So have some people around that can give you both of those things. And you have to determine also when you're doing your own assessment, self-assessment individually and as an organization, are you risk averse?
Yep.
And what level of risk are you willing to take to go out and try? Because you can't stand still forever. You've got to the wheels have to keep turning, in some way, shape, or form. And then you continue to deal with whatever may come your way. I'd have the people who know you, people who may not know you, but care about you and you can trust. Everybody, you must trust them. The financial acumen, the donor perspective, but also we have to always be mindful of that decades old issue and the chasm sometimes between development and programming. So the people who are on the front lines of things, understanding what they're going through, what they're seeing, what they're hearing. And again, that spirit of community and convening and leaving space. I've done that with Woke and other organizations I know have done that. Just let's go sit on a Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or just call me. Like, what's going on? How are you feeling? What is it that you need to express? Is there something that we can workshop together? That having another perspective and being helpable and humble that way is going to help move something in the right direction for you. So those are the things I'd say. Does that answer your question?
It does. I love the coach analogy.
Yeah.
Because I think about that from the perspective of there is not an athlete out there, a performer out there, anyone who's at the top of their game who doesn't have that constant continual learning coach. And I feel like what nonprofit fundraisers, executive directors, development directors sometimes are doing is in a silo and is in isolation.
Well, we reward and have heralded this idea of once you get to a place of solo, when the training wheels come off, that's success, right? We haven't necessarily cultivated the same idea about the network, the community that's working together to make that possible. And I think, that's deeply embedded in our sector in a lot of ways.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think too, what I love is sort of underscoring this idea of inclusive philanthropy being a practice versus a destination. And I think our sector really grafted onto this idea of checkboxiness and we've arrived, right? But it's not. It's a continual everyday practice because once you do this thing and then it kind of opens up this other room of things you can do.
Right.
And so what are the opportunities when people lean into that space?
Opportunities in what context?
What's the opportunity for an organization that decides we are inviting in inclusive philanthropy as a practice, as part of our mission work?
I think it really comes down to the bottom line. It's very interesting because when I work with women's philanthropy, that's the thing. Hundreds of millions of dollars are left on the table every year because people do not understand how to steward women donors.
Yep.
Why would you not do that?
Right.
It's the right thing to do, but it's also smart to do because it's going to impact your bottom line. So I think that, again, it's the beauty of different perspectives of having different people at the table, and it's the cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you need the money to come in the door and you will most likely garner far more dollars by having different types of donors and people, come in. I was having a conversation once with a man who, he used the example of, I think he said, a prostate cancer charity. Like, why would a woman give to that? And I'm like, I just said, because my grandpa had that.
Yeah.
Because again, assumptions.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so you have to think, just because you're a different gender doesn't mean you care about this thing. I was like, and I'm sure you would care about breast cancer, right? Or some other, or ovarian, if there's a woman in your life that was impacted by that. And he's like, yeah, of course. And so that was just like one tiny example, but the opportunities are boundless.
Yep.
If you're thinking about the people, again, to have at the table, the dollars that you can raise, and the good work that you can see done just by giving. I think the third prong of that is people who are so often potentially overlooked.
Yeah.
People, especially when it comes to differently abled people, and sometimes people have things that are going on that you can't see. They're invisible.
Yep.
Right.
But it's like, or if they're totally visible, it's like people may not perceive you as someone that can contribute. That when you get into ableism and different things like that, but you're brilliant and you do have dollars.
Right.
And why not invite you to that table? So just getting away from assumptions, and the pendulum swings both ways. We want it to look like everybody. It doesn't mean anybody else is not there. That's the beauty, right? We want white men and women and Black men and Latina and people with disabilities. And it's not just race. It's like, we want the women there. We want the people, we want everybody to have a place, at the table of good work. And so that's what that means, is just taking on those opportunities to raise those dollars and bring other perspectives in.
It's not pie.
It's not pie. Yeah.
Well, and I think people get in that space. And so I just want to continue to fortify our fundraisers when they are talking within their organizations to really hone in on, this is why.
I think people place an artificial limitation sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
An assumption of a donor. I want to dive a little further into the demographic question, though, because you do so much advocacy work for women in philanthropy in particular. We have had lots of conversations lately about generational shifts in giving, about different trends in giving based on age group. We're also seeing trends in wealth and wealth changes. I'm curious, just like, when you take a big picture look at women in philanthropy, what are you seeing as far as like how people are giving, where there, might be shifts or changes, whether it be because of wealth transfer, whether it might be generational philosophies? What are some of the like demographic shifts that you're witnessing?
Well, I think, and I will direct you also to the Women's Philanthropy Institute, where I am on the National Council.
Excellent.
In the trove of taking things out just of theory, but putting them into practice. That's what we're all about there. And so I would say, a few years ago, we started to see some shifts between how couples give. Mm-hmm. That was the focus. And it's still, I believe, in the 60th percentile, 60th to 70th percentile of couples, will make decisions together. But that's shifting for women because they're starting to make some solo decisions as well. I actually see it as a potentially romantic thing. I said, if you're getting to know someone or you already love someone and you're starting, and it's like, what's important to you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me more about that. Tell me about the change you want to be in the world. I think that's a beautiful thing for someone to share with someone else. And but we know that's shifting for women because the great transfer of wealth is upon us.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that from a generational perspective. It's more nuanced, but we do have the data to support the fact we know the categories where different generations are prioritizing their dollars. And so I think, again, from family foundations to any other, dynamic where you have different generations, it's important to hear people out. Again, convening and communication and community and respect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of an understanding that this may not be as important to you for whatever particular reason, but hear me out. Let's talk about this, to make some philanthropic decisions together. But I think that women are coming into their own clearly, inspired by some of these major, major philanthropic gifts that we're seeing come to fruition. But also, I think there is something especially when it comes to gender, especially when it comes to women's philanthropy. And if you want to take it even further to women of color and some of the work that I do there, eradicating the scarcity mindset and the imposter syndrome of a woman who is defining philanthropy and thinking, I only have $200. I always say your name need not be etched in the walls of great institutions to be a philanthropist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just, if you're generous, you're a philanthropist. So own it.
Yes.
And be proud of it and be happy about it and think of yourself that way. Philanthropic identity. This is also my quote. Philanthropic identity is philanthropic power.
Oh, yep. Philanthropic identity is philanthropic power. Yes,
it is. If you don't think of yourself as being philanthropic, then what power will you have with that $200? That, especially with collective giving, and all my friends over at Philanthropy Together and everywhere else, and Hallie Lee's new book, I'll give a plug to her, the big we about the future of philanthropy being collective giving, So it's just like, there's so many different things at play, but we just have to understand each other and we have to believe that we're philanthropic. And then you take your dollars and you speak to whatever power that you're trying to see.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm witnessing is the collective action. We're seeing softwares and AI tools and all sorts of things roll out to create like matching programs and partner up, donor with mission and other donors. And we're seeing, philanthropy groups get together and pool their $200 gifts for bigger impact. It's pretty exciting to witness that the rebuilding of systems that didn't work and transforming of new systems and new ways is happening alongside of the change and the crumble and the evolution of, sort of what's happening on a national scale. It's pretty exciting to see the conversation evolving for our sector, because it feels like we've kind of been in a stuck situation for a little while. And so it's interesting to witness. We were just at the AFP Icon Conference, and the big conversation at that conference was not happening on the stage. It was not happening by the organizers. It was not happening by the speakers. It was happening in coffee meetings. It was happening in the hallway. It was happening in, dinner conversations where folks were gathering together and doing that collective conversation about, now where do we go from here? How do we work together on this? How do we solve this as a group? So I love that you're doing this kind of advocacy work, this kind of coaching, this kind of just thought leadership in this space. It's important.
Thank you.
When we come back, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to hop in the fundraising elevator. We'll be right back.
Great.
We've been partnering with Greater Giving for over 20 years as our go-to event auction software. Greater Giving allows us to do our job, planning fundraising events, even better because we can manage guest lists, seating, bid number assignments, and sales all in one place.
That makes it great for our nonprofit partners and their guests. Check out Greater Giving for your next event at greatergiving.com. Link in the show notes. Welcome back. We are talking to Yolanda F. Johnson, who's brilliant at all things philanthropy. I've so enjoyed listening to her today in this conversation. We'd like to invite you into the fundraising elevator where we're all headed up. We ask all of our guests this question. What is that piece of wisdom, that tip you would offer our fundraisers out there so that they can continue heading up?
I would say let go of the transaction of fundraising.
Yes.
People give to people.
Yes. I endorse that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. This is what I always call it. I can't believe how many times I've quoted myself, but I guess I believe in what I've said.
Yes.
So I'm just saying.
I love
fundraisers are beacons of light and hope, illuminating the path to the good work needed in the world today.
Yes.
I said that because I believe it. We are illuminating the path. It is a proud and noble profession. You are not begging anybody for money. You are illuminating the path. So when you get rid of the transactional aspects of it and are really working with people, they will be alongside you, walking forward together, going up on that elevator with you.
Love it.
Yes,
You
I
heard
love
it here.
Well, if people want to know more about your work, if they want to know more about women of color in fundraising and philanthropy, I said that backwards, didn't I? Philanthropy and fundraising. If they want to understand how to connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just make sure you always use my F. I'm always Yolanda F. Johnson. You can find me online, my website. You can get in touch with my chief of staff, Chiquita, who's amazing, at info@yfj-consulting.com. That's also the website, yfj-consulting.com. You can find me on Instagram, yolanda.f.johnson. So yeah, any of those different ways. You can also go to WOKE's website, especially if you're interested in joining us in June 25th. That is woc-fp.com.
We will link to all of these resources in the show notes as well. You're a treasure.
Thank you.
And this sector is all the better for everything you do and everything you inspire. And we are so grateful to have had some time with you today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. You two are lovely. Wishing you continued. I hope you go all the way up to the penthouse in the sky. On your
Let's do it. May we all go up to the penthouse in the sky. May we all go. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Yolanda. Have a great day.
You too.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Hey y'all, it's Kristin. Before we leave, I want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.